Parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits. All right, Adam. Thanks for joining me on another Friday evening. I'm actually feeling a little tired this evening, man. It's been a long week. How's your week been?
My week has been great. I got the novel back from a copy editor, and then I got the cover back from cover artist. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the novel. I want to hear about it. So the cover, I saw the picture you sent me. One, that's awesome. It kind of looks it looks like an Ayn Rand cover to me. Honestly, it's got that kind of like Art Deco skyscrapery feel to it. It looks like the cover like the Fountainhead from back when I read that a million years ago. I don't know. That was my first impression.
So it's good to hear that, because definitely Art Deco was the guidance I gave, because the building that the story takes place is in an Art Deco skyscraper. So it is good to hear that is coming across in the image.
It did. Right there. That was my first impression. So awesome. I mean, I look forward to reading it. I know you've been close hold with it, and I understand that for sure, but I look forward to reading it when it comes out. Super excited.
So, all right. So tell me about your week. What'd you have going on?
So, man, I just a little worn out. So I got a day job, right? I mean, of course, I'm not, I know we think that the life of a professional podcaster would be all glamorous relaxation, but sure enough, still got a day job. And, I put on training exercises for special operations folks. And this week we had a big one. So I'm here with, Chinooks coming in, Blackhawks coming in, bombs going off, buildings getting blown up. Like it was awesome. It was a really good event, but of course you put a lot into it and I'm a little bit tired, but actually I saw when I was out there watching, one of the things I love watching the most, one of my very favorite things to watch on a training exercise is dog training, attack dogs, right? I know it's probably a little weird because attack dogs have kind of a bad rep, but as two guys who talk a lot about how to live your best life, how to be your best self, how to focus on the moment, how to just get the most out of life. I tell you, nobody does it like attack dogs. Like if you see a dog and he's getting ready to go after either the guy in the suit or the real life guy, if it's on a mission, go do a little bit of squirter control, like that dog is one, he's in the moment. And he looks just the most excited guy ever. He's with his bros. He's there. He's part of the team. He's one of the pack. He's got a job. And as soon as he gets told to go, he goes. That's it. And he loves it every moment. Like his tongue's hanging out. He's thrilled. That dude is living his very best life. I don't know. I mean, you work with dogs. I'm sure you have. What's your experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, they're pros. They're great military working dogs. They're a great member of the team. They've saved so many lives. And they're great. And so, yeah, like you said, like they get in, they execute. They don't really, some dogs, I guess, get nervous and anxious, but most of the dogs we work with, like, the Malinois, they kind of like, they get in, they do the job, and then they put it down when they're, when they get done, and they enjoy life. And actually, so in my novel, I have a dog named Diogenes, as he's one of the characters, and I try to like show him his personality.
That's awesome, right? I mean, it's counterintuitive. It's not how you would think attack dogs would be. Like in my head, I guess growing up, I would always assume they'd be like German Shepherds in movies, like just fearsome, bad all the time, just these, death machines. And they are, but at the same time, they're super friendly with the people they like. And again, I go back to it, but they're living their best lives, man. I mean, if we could all have jobs that we enjoyed as much as attack dogs enjoy their jobs, we would be lucky. I mean, think how awesome it'd be. Every day you go to work, hang out with your friends, get some snacks, run down, bite a dude in a suit. Great. Everybody's happy with you. Like every single moment is just like great times when you're in attack dog. Except when bombs go off or there's loud noises. They don't like those. But other than that, they seem to really have a pretty great life.
And they jump out of airplanes.
And free fall. They don't seem to enjoy that. Or
they do it all.
They don't seem to enjoy like ladders off of boats. Like our dog hated that. Like climbing the little ladder, boat, dog, not a fan. Completely not a fan.
Not feeling
something about the prop wash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it had to be prop wash or something. Maybe he just got seasick. I don't know. But it was, yes, other than those little moments, dog life seems like pretty solid life.
Definitely.
Oh, man. So last week, get back on topic, right? Last week, we talked adversity. We talked a lot about adversity, and we didn't quite get to the end of it because I think we ended up in this kind of situation of understanding what adversity provided for kind of dudes trying to be dudes. Like, it seems like we're wired to kind of need it. You need to overcome it. We can't really figure out why, but it did seem like there was a lot of positives to be gained by doing it. And so, this week we wanted to kind of follow up on that, talk a little bit about it, close that topic, and then talk about, how you actually determine the level of adversity that's appropriate for that. And we get into that kind of a discussion on risk. So is there does that work for you? You good covering that this evening?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think it'll be good, man. I think it'll be good. Oh, one thing though, I did want to tell you, I went out and watched Pride and Prejudice with Zombies, the trailer. On your recommendation last night, I'm in the middle of Pride and Prejudice. It's great between like massive sets of squats and grenades and, other manly things, and reading some Pride and Prejudice. But anyway, so we watched the trailer for Pride and Prejudice with Zombies. Atrocious. Like, 2.5 minutes of complete hot garbage. But at 16, just to be totally honest, I would have preferred it. 100% would have preferred that to the novel. So I got to give it its credit.
See,
have you seen it?
So I have not seen the movie, but I watched the trailer and I had like the opposite opinion. I'm like, I am here for this. This is amazing. Like, we're teaching women like to be well mannered and dress well and be well spoken and just kill with just extreme like ruthlessness and abandon. I'm like, yes, sign me up.
Just extreme prejudice, right?
Yes.
I can get that. And I love a good B movie. So don't get me wrong. I love a terrible movie, but I don't know, zombie movies. I'm okay with zombie movies, but I feel like sometimes they get a little overdone, and the zombies with whatever. I mean, come on, the Mr. Darcy Elizabeth, like, let's have a romance here and there's zombies. I don't know. It didn't do it for me.
So yes. So the zombies are there to help the narrative. And it's like the, you gotta eat your, your kale. You gotta have some healthy stuff before and then you salt in like the lessons, right? So, the zombies.
Are you suggesting the
zombies are like, the zombies are the Sour Patch Kids. And they're like, they get you there. They're like, yes, dude, Sour Patch Kids. Hell yeah. And then the kale is like just hidden inside the Sour Patch Kids of the zombies. So that's like the love story.
I think your analogy is suggesting that if I watch the whole movie, I'm going to get my Jane Austen. I'm going to get the quality of capturing 19th century England. I'm going to get the dialogue, but the zombies are what's going to draw me in. Like, you suggesting that that's
yes,
true?
I'm saying that behind that. So I've not seen it, but just speculating on air, I will say, I'm sure that there is a story, like there are echoes of Pride and Prejudice in there, interspersed with the zombie story. I absolutely believe that.
I need to watch. I'm going to watch the whole thing. That's it. Next time I'm traveling, I'm just going to watch the whole thing just to put this to bed, because at this point, I think you got to be wrong. I'm like, this movie doesn't have that depth in it. I think they just turned the sisters into zombies. I'm pretty sure there's no depth to this movie.
No,
I'll check it out.
And I'm certain that the book has the same thing. Like, they're trying to, really, like, anything can be done. It's just in the skillful execution of it. So I'm certain that the author of the novel did a great job of like tying Pride and Prejudice and zombies together nicely. The movie, I'm not as certain, but I think there's probably still things in there.
Well, I'm gonna give it a shot. I will watch it, and we're gonna just to see. I know we've talked about doing an episode on some other classics like Big Trouble in Little China, but this one we might have to circle back and talk about Pride and Prejudice with zombies now.
Okay, all right, I'll give it up enough. I'll give it a whirl as well.
Oh man. Okay, back to adversity again, because again we've gone off topic and terrible about tangents, but I actually ended up with a really cool article on adversity pushed to me by my wife this week. So my wife was educated as a molecular biologist. She's super smart on this stuff. And when I started asking her the why question, she kind of looked at me and was like, well, yeah, I can tell you why. Like, well, I wish you'd been on the podcast. You could have answered the question for it right there. But basically, she pushed an article by a guy named Rostenberg. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. But basically, it laid out exactly why the male brain needs challenges to overcome to kind of feel relaxed. And I'm going to give you the 1 minute, not science guy version of that. And I think I can probably talk it well enough. So basically, testosterone in the brain, breaks down or creates some kind of reaction that breaks down dopamine. So a male brain that's got a normal level of testosterone will tend to lose dopamine. And I'm probably saying that all wrong, but dopamine, of course, is the hormone that makes you happy, right? It's the thing that makes you feel happy. So over time, left to its own devices, the male brain will, and this is a generalization. There are individuals, everybody's different. So I don't want to get into, I'm just going to caveat that up front to say everybody's a little different. But in general, you'll tend to break down dopamine, and the breaking down of dopamine will tend to make you grouchy or angry, right? Those are your kind of default left to your own devices breakdown. You'll end up there. However, if you undertake activities that create cortisol, the cortisol is a stress hormone. So physically intense things, stressful situations, bringing on a bunch of tasks like going out and shooting, playing sports, stuff that gets you roughed up. The cortisol then is broken down instead of the dopamine, because apparently whatever the reaction that breaks down the dopamine, whatever testosterone does to cause that to break down, it will prefer cortisol. It will break down the cortisol first. And so the cortisol actually acts to protect the dopamine in your brain and protect your kind of happiness level. So to me, it seems almost inexplicable that I'm going to go and I'm going to do something. I feel kind of irritable. I'm going to go out and do something hard and horrible. But after I finish that, I actually feel better than I did before, even though I got the crap beat out of me, or I'm smoked terribly, or I'm sore and exhausted. But somehow that inexplicably to me makes me feel better. Actually, apparently that's totally reasonable. Did I say that in a way that makes sense? Because I thought it was really cool to find that out.
Yeah, I always thought that oxytocin was the one that's like I don't know, it's like the happy hormone, and the dopamine is like, you get a hit from, in the modern world, you're on your device, or, you're checking something off a checklist. A lot of people, they'll accomplish something on their to-do list that's like not on that they didn't write down, and they'll like write it down just so they can check it off because they get this like dopamine hit, but it's probably similar. Hit. Yeah.
So again, I'm absolutely not a scientist, but if we just simplify it and say, hey, your level of happiness will gradually decrease because you have testosterone in your brain. If you do stressful things, it will create a stress hormone that is broken down instead. And so not only does it break down the stress hormone and reduce the anxiety that cortisol can produce, right? But it protects the happy hormone and allows you to kind of stay calm. And so I suspect, I don't know this, that as your testosterone levels fluctuate as you get older, probably you end up with less of that reaction, right? It all becomes a little less dynamic. Like let's say you have less testosterone, presumably, the rest of your dopamine or oxytocin, if that's correct, would stay more stable. I don't know that, but this is me speculating. This is me wondering, like, well, as we get older, do we need less of that kind of aggressive, let's get out there and do this? Is that why? This is me trying to understand the why now. So I don't know, but I thought it was absolutely fascinating to think that, neurochemically, not just like spiritually, but neurochemically, there's a solid reason why you got to get out there and climb mountains and pick fights in order to just feel level and happy.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that a hard, exercising your body strenuously is a huge source of, mental health and like kind of recharging your batteries. So I can definitely understand that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we all kind of figure it out, but it's interesting to know it, right? And I see it as a parent. I see it all the time. My 14-year-old, I can watch him just get grouchy and irritable as the course of the day. And you put him out and have him do some yard work, have him go for a run. He'll come home, he'll gripe about it, but then he comes home, he's happy. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to see, I guess, the math or the science behind why that would play out. But it also makes me wonder, like, bigger picture. So many people like sit at home, be irritable, be cranky, not know what to do, be kind of despondent. It makes me wonder, I mean, it's not like it's a secret to say a little exercise might help you out, but it makes me wonder how many of those people might just be like half fixed by going out and just getting after it, just going out and doing something serious. I don't know. I mean, do you think that's only physical exertion? What other forms of cortisol? I mean, public speaking will produce cortisol. I wonder if it works the same way.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know about public speaking necessarily, but yeah, I think there's a lot we can do if we're in a bad state to improve it that is not, external interventions like, getting just restful sleep, nutrition and exercise. These are all like very simple things that don't cost a lot of money that we can do first before we kind of pile on, all the other interventions.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that's true. And again, now this is like super intuitive. I mean, everybody kind of intellectually knows that. But it's funny, I think you can actually find yourself, I mean, it happens to me too, right? You can find yourself in kind of the downward spiral where you're actually just irritated and you don't, the irritation and the kind of that you're feeling makes you not want to do any of the things that you probably know would make you feel better, but you end up not want to do them anyway. I'm just going to sit here and stare at the monitor, sit here and stare at whatever I'm doing because it feels to me, it's almost like a dopamine trap, right? Like you feel like you are going to get something positive out of it. You get a little something positive, but not as positive as you would if you did something different. I think it's easy to find yourself trapped in that funk, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of don't think, just do, and you just got to get out of your mind. If you're ruminating and you're perseverating on things, get out and move your body. However, walk, run, ruck, swim, cycle, yoga, whatever it is. I think, there's like the head up and then there's like the neck down. And if you can, exercise, the catchphrases in the communities are like embodiment and somatics. I think that really can do wonders for your perspective.
Somatics just like do something physical. Is that what that means?
Somatics is just like bodily. Yeah, I don't know the exact definition, but I think it just means like relating to your, basically, not your mind, but your body.
Getting out of your head. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, intellectually, I don't know about you, but I get a lot of my best thinking done if I'm out exercising. Like if I'm stuck, if I'm not sure, like, all right, I'm having frustrated on this writing section, I'm just not coming together, like getting out there and tying up the rest of myself, doing something else that's not intellectual in the least, like raking the yard. Sure enough, that tends to produce solutions like pretty commonly. I don't know what your thing to cure writer's block is, but it's kind of what we're talking about.
So there's a name for that. I can't remember it. It's like transient hypofrontal. Basically there's a mechanism by which when you're strenuously exercising, parts of your brain disengage, and that allows other stuff to bubble to the surface. Because Haruki Murakami, the famous novelist, he goes for like very, very long, hard runs, and that kind of like resets his body, cleans him out, and then the same thing, like ideas will just start bubbling up, as part of that process.
It's weird, and again, it's almost counterintuitive. Like you'd imagine that you'd want to, like, I don't know, get a cup of something nice and sit down, have the paper in front of you and the pen, and you'd like, this is how the ideas are going to come. But I don't find that to be the case at all. I find they usually come either during conversation or out during a walk or something totally unrelated, like sitting at a meeting, not paying any attention, or raking, something like that. It's weird.
I'm always like, I got an Apple Watch and I'm always like texting myself on the watch with like stuff I think of like while I'm walking or running. So yeah, same thing. It helps me think of ideas for essays and then fiction ideas as well.
100%. Got to find a way to jot them down, right? You have to have some kind of mechanism to capture the ideas. But that's even not just as a writer. That's like normal life. I don't know about you, but I got to do that. Or that's such a great idea. And you try and scribble it like on your palm, and it sweats half off, and you're like, you try to remember what it is. Yeah, I mean, that to me, that's one of the huge lessons I had to learn when I was younger. Is like always carry something around to write with, and it sounds stupid, but otherwise you'll lose so much good material by just not having it on hand.
Yeah, there's an expression. There's like a proverb that's like the palest ink is better than the finest memory. It's something like that. I can't remember the exact one, but the point is like if you don't capture it in the moment, it may just float off and you've lost it. And there's nothing worse for me than like I think of something and then I lose it, and I'm like, oh, like hopefully I'll think of it again. I don't know, but maybe it's gone and it'll go to somebody else.
Isn't that so frustrating? Like when you try to get your brain back around whatever the thing was that you forgot, and then it just gets further away. Like it's like trying to catch it makes it even harder to catch. Like it's almost there, and then when you try to grab it, it's gone. That's super frustrating. That's absolutely. Actually, I write a memoir, write war memoirs, and I wonder sometimes about that aspect of it, because one of the funny things about the writing process is you talk to people who were there, and one, it's amazing to see how different the perspectives of the other people who were there at the same time doing the same thing. You're like, oh, you remember this thing? You're like, no, that's not how I remember it at all. It's one that just blows my mind. How different, just nothing different except the observer, how different that can change the entire story. But two, I wonder about the quality of memory. When I see how differently people remember stuff, it shocks me sometimes to think like, well, you don't remember that? How did you? Right. And then somebody might tell you and you'll remember it all of a sudden. You're like, how? Memory is crazy.
And that goes back to humility, because we're literally just shining flashlights in the dark, and our perception is so imperfect. And like there was a show on Discovery maybe called Brain Games, where they would highlight that sort of thing, and they did these
My
little
kids love
like
that one.
yeah, they did like these fake, where they would like simulate like a crime. They'd have like a crowd of people, and then something would happen, like a, whatever, a pickpocket or something. And then they would ask everybody there, like, what did you see happen? Did you see the guy in the green jacket? And you could watch people collectively change their memories as they got prompted by these other inputs. And it's like terrifying for, jury trials, because we're like, this is, you know, you see how fallible human memory is, and then we're like, this is the best system of justice we have right now, and it's just so imperfect, but it's the best that we have.
It's the best that we have. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you experience this a lot too, but you have to take a lot of sworn statements. You have to do a lot of kind of police sort of activity when you're detaining people overseas. And it's sometimes shocking to just see, one, how differently everybody remembers things, but two, how easy it is to kind of get a little bit of group think in there. And then all the stuff just kind of starts
Mhm.
to synchronize. I think people want to be agreeable, right? And it is weird. It's very weird. I agree.
Yeah, they have a what is it? There's a type of experiment with like where they show people these uh, different lines of different lengths on a piece of paper, and then they have it's set up so everybody in the experiment is in on it except for one person, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's this one," and it's like clearly not the longest line, like obviously, but a lot of people will just go along with it because they don't want to be the outlier to the group.
It's like the one thing that actually proves to me is that scientists are complete dicks. Like, I mean, there's so many experiments like that where it just,
Yeah.
hey,
Well,
if
oh
we
yeah.
if we have a simulated guy that looks like he's feeling pain, and when you push the button, and then I yell
Oh
at
yeah.
you, eventually, sure enough, people will push the button just because they're being yelled at. They're like, why?
Yeah.
You're
So
like
that
ruining this person's life. Like
so
you're
that's
building
like
this PTSD
well,
moment
so
into
I
this
guess
guy.
first of all we should say that the experimental protocols have changed since that was like the Milgram, and then the Stanford prison experiment, obviously. But there's one they
Absolutely.
do. There's one they do. They have like five people in a room, and they start pumping smoke in the room, and they have like four people don't do anything, and the fifth person's like, well, I guess it's good. Um, but if the person is in the room by themselves, they like react to it. But in the group, and if the group is not reacting, they don't do anything.
It's amazing. I'm sure there are plenty of wonderful scientists in the world. By the way, I don't want to, get tons of hate for saying scientists are dicks, but it's just the mentality to come up with an experiment like that. Like, hey, man, you want to really screw with this one person? Let's put them in there and let's set up the entire world so that they think they're crazy. I mean, I, it's weird. The experiment ends, but presumably that person still, lives life as the person who knows it. He was so susceptible to group pressure that he didn't have the ability to think for himself. Like you kind of just cracked that dude's entire like self confidence. That just kind of sucks.
Yeah, and that goes back to, we talked about you're your own canopy commander, right? So you can take in the policy or the procedures, but at the end of the day, like you are owning the risk. So you have to think critically and discerningly, and then make your own decisions. And so that's what we have to kind of foster in other humans.
No, you're right, and that actually circles us back to the topic of the day, which is of course risk. And that idea that you as the canopy commander, right? So when just when we say canopy commander, of course we mean person flying the parachute, right? Once you jump out of an airplane, you open the parachute, you got your little toggles, you can steer it more or less depending on the type of parachute. And when we say you're the canopy commander, like at that moment, nobody else can help you. Right at that moment, from the moment when you open at, let's say 4,000 feet to the moment when you hit the ground, everything about your life is completely in your hands, and you are completely responsible for the decisions you make. It's there's a little group think on determining which direction you should face when you land. So you get a little group think there, and you see that same experiment played out. But I like that you are your own canopy commander. It's a fun expression because it is truly a very distinct feeling of, okay, here we go. Time to make some decisions.
Yeah, because I mean, you own all the risk at that point, and it's like, and to your point about landing, you start landing in a different direction, you're going to endanger the other people in your group. So it definitely, you own the risk until you get to the ground.
100%. And Yeah, exactly. And you can run the downwind landing. If the guy in front of you makes a downwind landing, you can roll with it. You can try and cut it the last. You got options, but fortunately none of them are good. I my favorite is when we get into risk mitigation and parachuting, because we're talking about parachuting, is the cutaway. The idea of like the cutaway, right? So we just said you're your canopy commander. You're the guy that makes all the decisions about whether you live or die and whether you have a horrible, painful afternoon or you can go have a beer and relax. Um, when you first open your chute, you have to check, of course, to see if it's a functional chute because you'll have errors, right? You'll have malfunctions that will keep the parachute functioning. You could have a line over, it could look like a bow tie. It could just be this shrivelly little mess because you had enough nylon burn when it came out that it turned into what do they call that? A cigar roll? I think it's a
Oh,
cigar roll.
yeah.
Am I saying that wrong? Anyway, it's been a minute. But you have to look up at that chute and you yourself, you have a reserve chute that's on you in almost all situations. You have to look up at the chute above you and make the determination. Do I keep what I got or do I go with this other chute? So how high am I? Does the other chute work? Well, this one's okay. I might not die if I land with it. If I cut away and open this reserve, could be better, could somehow be worse. That moment of do I cut away is one of the very most amazing risk mitigation, risk decisions anybody I think ever has to make.
Yeah, it's like going back to our tabletop gaming, right? So it's like, okay, I can keep this and I'm going to suffer the X damage when I land, or I can cut away and then I got to roll the D20, the 1D20, the 20 sided die. And then what happens with this canopy? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be, have other problems?
Yeah, it's like draw poker. It has a lot in common with draw poker, except that, of course, playing cards mostly isn't a fatal thing. Cutting that shoot away is a little more nerve wracking. And also you're on the clock, right? You're losing, X feet per second. You don't have a lot of time for the decision. Nobody can advise you. You can't phone a friend. You got nothing. You just have to make the determination. And it's not an amazing moment, but, it builds character, right? It builds character. It's
Absolutely.
adversity. So it probably is protecting dopamine. That moment right there, that was protecting dopamine in your life. You might not have appreciated, but it actually made you happier later that day. I
Yeah.
think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely a stressful evolution, at least for me.
It is super stressful. But let's pick, especially at night. At least at night, though, nobody can see you. I like the old expression that every night jump is a good jump, right? Because, how was your jump? That was great. It's great. Totally was not a disaster.
I'm still alive. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was amazing. But let's pick that apart a little bit, and not parachuting. We probably talked that to death, but let's talk risk mitigation. So, one of my very favorite subjects ever, and I think professionally, it's what we both did for a lot of years, right? Risk mitigation, and risk mitigation is really the sister science, or not sister science, but like the science that supports a lot of the adversity stuff we've been talking about the last day. Because risk mitigation is what allows you to actually assess this thing facing you. You have something you want to do. There is an obstacle in the way. You have to make a determination of, well, how likely is this obstacle to matter? How serious is this obstacle? And how much am I willing to invest to kind of mitigate or to make this obstacle get out of the way so I can accomplish what I was doing? And I love it, man. I think it's absolutely fascinating. But you guys maybe pretty much do it the same way. Is that roughly the same process?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like the Navy has their own, doctrinal operational risk management. The SEAL teams have their own flavor of that. And then there's like kind of the difference between, what you put on paper and then what you actually do out in the field to actually keep people safe. Yeah.
So we're saying there's a difference between the copy paste risk assessment that we turn in to have our training approved and the actual things we do to mitigate risk in real life.
So there's like a Yogi Berra quote that's, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice.
It absolutely makes sense and it resonates. But I mean, I guess the closest analogy I can imagine for the civilian world would be if you had like a printed out investment plan that you just kept by your computer, and every time he was like, well, what do you do to prepare for the future? You just handed him this thing. You're like, this is what I do. It had no bearing on what you actually do. It had nothing, it did not resemble in any way how you lived your life, but it gave you kind of the credibility of, let's say, the person you were applying to a job for, that you were responsible and knew what you were doing. That's basically how the military risk assessment, at least on the paperwork side, functions, in my experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, you have like, Yeah, you have the bureaucratic requirements, and then you have, what you're going to put in place. And sometimes they match. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delta or a gap between them.
And for sure. And let's talk about the real stuff, right? The bureaucratic process is silly, and it's fun to joke about, how I'm going to mitigate, rabid animals by talking to people about rabbit. I mean, just you'd put the most ridiculous things on there because you want to be comprehensive, right? So it'd be like 30 pages long, but nobody ever read it. But in real life, it's a super practical thing, right? Because if you're going on a combat mission, or honestly, you're just taking a road trip, or you're deciding what sports your kids can play, the science of risk mitigation is the same regardless. You have to really decide, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. How, what are the things that are going to keep you from accomplishing it? Okay. So let's say I want my kid to grow up and I want him to be tough, and I want him to feel like, like I want him to be a tough guy. I want him to overcome some things. So I want him to go play football. All right. I want my boy to play football because I think that's going to accomplish this task of making him a tough guy. Okay, let's talk about the risks. Like, well, he could get a concussion, right? I think it's the biggest one. He could break his neck. He could have some kind of brain damage that debilitated him. He could tear his ACL. I mean, those are all the risks. Those are all the risks that would keep him from accomplishing the thing I wanted to accomplish. And so I have to look at like, well, how likely are those things to happen? How severe would it be if they happened? And then how do I mitigate them? And so I think it's super applicable, but I think unfortunately we don't always put a lot of deliberate thought into it. And so we end up mitigating risks that don't matter and putting no effort into mitigating the risks that are actually really serious. But do you use it in your daily life?
Yeah. So I want to back up just a second. I sent you a while ago a paper by a guy named Preston Klein. I think he's got a thing called the Mission Critical Institute now. But he wrote this paper, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago about risk and Army Special Operations Command. And he goes through the definition of the word risk all the way back to the 1600s. And what he sees is in 1611, it was defined in one of these, I don't know, like the Webster's Dictionary or whatever it was back in the day.
The Oxford English Dictionary.
It was something like that.
The famous one.
But in 1611, the definition of risk was peril, jeopardy, danger, hazard, chance, and adventure. And then in 1656, this guy changes the definition. What is that guy's name? I can't find the guy's name, but Thomas Blunt, Blunt. Anyway, so he removes the word adventure from the definition, and I think that is important for our discussion today because that is kind of the upside of risk. And we are always looking now, we view risk with a very negative lens, like something's going to be taken from us, we're going to be injured, something bad is going to happen. And it's lost that definition of something to be gained from the endeavor.
No, I haven't heard it phrased that way, but I see what you're saying. He's kind of taking risk broader than the original dude. He's taking risk broader than we mean it now, because when we say, well, something is risky, mostly we mean that something bad could happen if you do it. But he's almost including like adversity into that decision, like this kind of like thing that you can overcome and that there's a gain in so doing. That's interesting. I wonder why they made the determination to split it. I mean, it's probably just to wicker down the definitions. I guess doesn't matter. It's 500 years ago.
And it's a great commentary on like how words determine a lot of our reality because we think in words. And so when we lose that positive opportunity out of risk, then it becomes like a fear-based thing instead of like a growth-based thing.
No, yeah. I see what you're saying. I don't think that we're trapped into that, though. I think we can still use the word risk just fine. We just have to understand what we mean and what we don't. I think one of the traps a lot of people fall into when you're talking about this kind of fear-based mentality associated with risk, instead of just, is one, you're not being calculating enough about it. You're not really just understanding it. Like, of course, it's going to be terrifying to think about all the risks out there if you don't put any thought into them. But if you put a little bit of thought into them, you can understand that, like, well, That's probably not going to happen. And if it did, is it really that bad, right? So insurance market is wonderful at playing this up, right? You get the insurance clause, like, well, do you want this? Do you want the coverage for this? Like when you rent a car, I just had to do this a few days ago. Well, do you want accidental driver crashes into your protection? Do you want scratched at the supermarket protection? Do you want this protection? And in your head, you're like, well, what if that does happen? I'd be in a really world of hurt. I'd be terrible. I could have to pay $100,000 for this Toyota Corolla from 3 years ago that somehow is going to, multiply in value when I crash it at the supermarket. But if you stop for a minute, you think like, that doesn't matter. Like those things, one, they're very unlikely to happen. Two, I already have insurance that's going to cover it. So all this coverage is just trying to squeeze money out of me in a fears-based manner. But to your point, I think the thing that a lot of people get stuck on is just like you said, the fear side of it. You get stuck on the fear side of it. And one, you don't recognize the opportunity that a risky situation can provide. But two, you forget that a lot of it's not real, right? A lot of that's not even there. It's all in your head. And so if you can get it on paper and just think through it, you can eliminate a large portion of perceived risk with just a little bit of thought. I mean, is that true?
Yes. And I think that goes back to when we talked about after 9/11, people were afraid to fly because of the risk of terrorism. And then they started driving everywhere. And that, I've seen some analysis that said that resulted in, thousands more deaths because more people are on the road and actually driving was the riskier transportation mode than flying. So, and then the other thing is, I don't know if you remember from Naval Postgraduate School, we talked about prospect theory, which is some economic theory that when something is framed with like a loss frame, we become, that changes our perception of it versus like it's framed in like a gaining frame. And the takeaway of prospect theory is like losses are more painful to humans than gains. So then gains are like positive. Mm-hmm. So it makes us just be hesitant because we're just afraid of losing something.
It's funny, right? Because that can trick people. That exact thing can trick people into making the dumbest decisions, right? We all have these moments where to avoid loss, you end up with no gain or more loss than you would have suffered if you just done it. I mean, obviously, investing is probably the most obvious answer for this. Like if you just park money in the S&P 500 over 40 years, it's probably going to grow unless the entire system collapses. It's probably going to do fine. But a lot of people will hesitate to buy in because they're worried about potential loss. And so you can end up kind of, stopping yourself from what is probably a fairly low risk and long-term beneficial decision by just getting caught up in this fear that, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if it doesn't go well? And I think it's a trap people fall into in all kinds of facets in their lives, right? It's very easy to fall into. I mean, it happens all the time. You see it in combat. It happens. I think people increasingly with combat exposure become inclined to paralysis for that exact reason. You can see the horrible consequence over and over and over, or at least you can imagine the horrible consequence over and over, and you can start having trouble making decisions. It's a dangerous trap to fall into, right? Just fear-based way of life.
It is, and that goes to the importance of having a good team and a diversity of perspectives so if one person, gets into that mindset, there are others to fill in the blind spots and kind of talk through things and kind of come to a more measured conclusion.
Yeah, 100%. You need somebody in your life, I mean, my wife does this for me a lot. Obviously friends do this, but you need somebody to kind of check your logic, show them your homework, talk through it over a cup of coffee and just see like, does this make any sense? Or sometimes you won't even think to ask if it makes sense. And that person will just stop you like, hey, Ben, you're being an idiot. What are you talking about? Like what you're saying doesn't make any sense, but you get so wrapped up in it in your head. You get so wrapped around these kind of illusions that you kind of lose the ability to kind of see reality. And, yeah, I mean, obviously that's, combat is a case when that's probably the most pronounced, but again, you see it all the time. And people, I have no retirement savings. I'm 70 years old. I have no retirements. I've never saved anything. Like that risk has been there your entire life. And it's a very real risk. And the likelihood of it happening is 100%, right? If you save no money, the risk that you'll have no money in retirement is 100%. And it's severe. I think we would say it is both a high risk and a likely risk. And yet inexplicably, you could take no moves to mitigate that your entire life because either perceived loss or kind of inability to look forward and assess the risk properly. It's interesting to see the kind of traps we fall into. I think health, very similar.
Well, yeah, there's a concept called hyperbolic discounting, and that's where we prioritize short-term gains over the long term. And I think you see that all over the modern world. We're definitely focused on what are we doing now? We got to get growth now. We got to get growth now, rather than thinking about
Yeah.
sustainable growth for the future. And then to throw another funny phrase in there, we end up eating our own seed corn. So we're not planning it for next year. We're just eating it, and then we got nothing for next year.
You see it. You see it in publicly traded companies. I mean, I'm not an economist, but you see this kind of drive for quarterly profits. Like we got to show a quarterly profit. We got to show a quarterly profit. And if you made sacrifices in the quarterly realm to achieve long-term goals, solid risk you'd be fired, right? Solid risk that people would lose faith in can you, because it's hard to, especially now. And I think it's related to information overload. This is just kind of going off the cuff and thinking, but I suspect strongly that the rapidity with which we can identify, locate, soak in information on a given situation makes it feel like that situation is moving faster and can make risk feel more real than it really is, right? It can prevent you from making a good long-term decision because, well, if I read 17 things about a thing in 1 minute, that makes the thing more likely. Actually, it doesn't. It doesn't actually make it more likely. It just makes you more aware of it. And so that's
Yeah.
a uniquely internet-y problem.
Well, and then that like goes into how algorithms can delude us, because they'll, you click on a story about X, whatever it is, like, somebody being bigoted or somebody being, you know, woke, whatever it is, right? And the algorithm starts feeding you more of those stories. And then you start, like, your reality is made up of this curated thing that's designed for you, that is just feeding you the exact content that is like just making you angry. And it's not an accurate depiction of reality, but it's just because of the interface that we've created with technology.
So that's a unique, not unique, but it's a new wrinkle into the entire kind of risk assessment process that we're talking about here that honestly, it was never too, I'm not going to say it was never a problem. So through combat, you have problems with faulty intelligence, right? So you'll have problems with things seeming more or less likely because the quality of the intelligence you're receiving makes them artificially seem that way. And that was always, and that's why they say, hey, trust your ground assessment, trust the guy on the ground, trust the guy who sees it in person. That's why people say that, right? That's where that kind of came from, is the idea that, well, you shouldn't trust what you hear, get out there and see it for yourself. But the internet has brought that problem home for everyone, right? Like it's exactly what you're talking about. You can get trapped into this echo chamber of thinking things are a way that actually aren't. Like if you walked out there like, oh my gosh, if I go to the inner city, I'm going to get shot. If I go to the inner city, I'm going to get shot. If I go to Colombia, I'm going to get shot. The internet, the news, everything can make it seem like these things are really dangerous. But honestly, like if you actually walk there yourself, talk to people and interact with them, you might find that a lot of what you thought was risky turns out to not be risky at all. And fortunately, I think the opposite is also true. Like the internet's funny like that. It can make really safe things seem horribly dangerous. I think it could also make really dangerous things seem super benign, but that is a trap. Like you'd be more discerning with information now than I think probably ever before.
Yeah, and I think, and we know that. There's been plenty of studies done to understand social media networks online, and what they find is that the content that stirs up fear and anger is just going to percolate through the system. If it leads, it bleeds. So, the framing of reality presented online is, things to make you fearful and angry, no matter what your political persuasion is. And so we have to be able to, seek alternative perspective, just like we did, on deployment. You want like a multi intelligence sourced target package, right? You don't just want like human, some guy pissed off at his neighbor for like sleeping with his wife, and he's like giving you these targets to hit. You want, SIGINT, you want, IMINT, you want all the different, as many different looks, as many different touches on the elephant blindfolded as you can.
The elephant, like you're referring, of course, to the old joke that, you ask 10 blind people to describe an elephant and one's going to describe a trunk and one's going to describe a foot and one's going to describe a tail. But he's like, it looks like a snake. It's like a tree. It's
Mm.
like a house, but nobody's going to capture the elephant correctly because they don't see the whole thing. But what a huge, I mean, this should be second nature to everyone by now, right? Everyone should know that you should second guess every single thing you hear on the internet. Like 90% of it is material that's somebody's paid for you to see. And the other 10% is, an algorithm showing you what it knows will provoke your response. But somehow it can still seem terribly real. And man, does that, I, I mean, again, as we talk risk assessment, as we talk about the ability to generate risk, I think the best way you can get out of that, the best way you can work yourself out of that is, well, one, to have real experiences. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch of times, like get off the internet and just go see things for real. But two, get used to being skeptical, right? I mean, one thing being a combat leader taught you is you should be skeptical of everything. If you get a tip, you should probably second guess that tip before you go execute it because the guy might be just walking you in on a trap. But the same thing applies when you're reading any news story or doing anything. Like, be skeptical, make your own decisions, and try to, second guess and fact check. Fact check is a loaded word too. Is everything a loaded word now? Like, how do you even fact check if you don't necessarily trust the sources you would use to fact check?
Yeah, and there's a couple issues going on because if you doubt everything, you will just be running through life exhausted. Like I can't fact check
paralysis.
everything.
You'll be in paralysis.
I can't go through life like that. So there's certain things I have to accept on faith, which is why we try to create, markers that we can all kind of accept. Like I look at you when you're active duty, you got a green beret. I'm like, I know what it took to get a green beret. I know what caliber of person you are. And, the same thing with a SEAL Trident. It's like, okay, I know that's a marker or, in a religious context, right? Like somebody that's got a cross on, we're like, okay, that person has got a certain credibility from this institution, and that will help us with trust. But if we don't have that, and this age has seen a massive degradation of trust, that makes it harder on the individual to like sense make.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's true, right? Because even institutions that you would think were credible may now probably have more cause to distrust than you did. And so you end up in this position of what you're talking about. It's almost like paralysis or fear. You're like, well, I can't trust anything. So how am I supposed to make any decisions? But to me, I think the way around that is just to get back to that ground truth, right? It's like, well, if you hear 7 different reports of what an objective that you're supposed to go and take looks like, well, then try to get some eyes on that objective. Try to go see it for yourself. If you hear something bad about a person or community, hey, go check that shit out and see it yourself and see what you think. Similar with kind of, I think, home experimentation. Like it can be easy to be paralyzed with data on the financial world, but it doesn't stop you from putting a little bit in there, a small amount, and checking to see what kind of returns you get. I mean, you can solve a lot of these problems, a lot of risk mitigation problems by just conduct your own experiment. Verify the results. I mean, is that
so no, we had a commander named Wyman Howard who is just a big figure in naval social warfare, but he's a character. He's definitely
I'm familiar.
Yeah, so you couldn't, like, if I tried to write him as a fiction writer, people would be like, that dude is like unrealistic. He's over the top. That guy is too much. But he's a real person, right? But one of his catchphrases was build a little, test a little, learn a lot. And the idea there is that like you're taking like an iterative approach. You're not just like putting all your chips in one thing. You're kind of figuring out, you're exploring the space, and then you can kind of make your big investments later on.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I think most people would do that intuitively, but it can be so much more emotionally easy to just do it all at once, get the thing over with, and take the swing. Obviously, it's much more foolish to do it, but sometimes you just get so tired of doing the little, like, well, I need to do a little here and test it out and see that you just want to just go, right? But to his point, actually, you can mitigate a lot of risk by just not jumping straight into the pool. Like, put your toe in there, see what it feels like. Are there alligators? Are there, it's got too much chlorine in it? You can save yourself some pain by going a little smaller. But doesn't always work, right? Because sometimes you do just need to take a swing. I mean, we were just talking about paralysis a second ago. I think one of the things that the American military is having problems with right now is that too many people are only willing to toe dip, and people aren't willing to jump in. I don't know that Wyman Howard is a good example of that. He's probably willing to jump in. I get the impression
He
he's willing to jump into things
100%
pretty
will.
well, but
He
but
100% will jump in.
but but the example stands. I mean, you can become so risk adverse and concerned that you're only willing to invest a little ever, and then you're never going to get any returns on that at all. So how do you determine when is which? How do you determine when to go little, when to go big?
Yeah, that
Simple question, right? Simple
yeah,
question.
I don't even know where to go with that with that question, because that's like there is, yeah, it goes back
Let
to
me cheat. Let me just go
all
back.
right.
Let me go back to the heuristic principles model. I would say that when you are truly faced in a situation when you don't know, like, hey man, do I just go little? Do I go wide? Is this the situation? Right? Sometimes you just go back to those first principles, the things that you live on, the things that kind of guide you. Like, in general, I trust that this is going to be the case. I'm going with it. But, and then once you make the decision, you got to just kind of accept it. I think that can be tough to do too, right? And once you pull the trigger, you got to just kind of live with what you do.
It depends. Like there was I read an article about, I don't know who it is, LA Paul, I think it was LA Paul. It talked about basically like what is it like to become a vampire, because it's like you don't know, and the vampire example is the same as like becoming a parent. You know, it's like your everything about your life is going to change, right? So you don't know, like you were never a vampire, like you don't know what it's like to be a vampire, but once you do this, like there's no going back. So it's the same thing with like becoming a parent.
True.
You know, so it's like, you know, people are just afraid of that decision, then they'll never make it. But and it's like you can't understand it until you're in it. So that may be the scenario that you're describing.
No, I think it is. I think it is, especially if long term you know you want to accomplish the thing. Like, let's say being a parent. Well, long term, I know that I do want kids, but it can be difficult to know exactly when I would pull the trigger on doing that. Like, because you do kind of turn into a vampire. Actually, it's pretty accurate, right? You don't sleep anymore. You get pale. You're kind of sickly. Like, actually, being a parent, being a vampire, not all that different. So that's
True.
a pretty good example.
Yeah.
But you're right. So I guess that is a time. That is when, well, do I toe dip? Do I toe dip? You could never toe dip into having kids.
Right.
You can toe dip about the right time. You can kind of mince around. You could put it off. But in the end, you can work your way right out of fertility, especially on the woman's side. Like, hey man, you do that for enough years, you won't have any kids anymore. It's just over for you. And so if you know long term you need to achieve a thing, well, you might really just have to kind of jump in on it. Like, hey man, damn the torpedoes. We're gonna pull the trigger on this.
Yeah,
and
so
become vampires.
I guess the only thing you can do is like, you know, you're with your partner, you know, you're trying out, like you get some house pets, you get a dog, you know, you're like, you go on trips
It's
together.
not the same.
No, but like, I guess what I'm getting at is like, so, and
Cactus.
you want to talk about like,
it's pretty much the same.
when you're, you know, you're trying to keep a plant alive, you're trying to keep a dog alive. Those are like the only thing we got. And then taking a trip, that's like the ultimate, because you're going to see that person hungry, cranky, like you're going to see them at their best and at their worst. So like, those are like the only approximations you can do to be like, is this a good thing we should try?
That's a good point. I was only thinking of it from, the yourself angle of, do I want to have children? But of course, there is the second person involved in that, and knowing whether or not that person is the person you should have children with. I think we did a whole episode on that. Like, don't screw that one up, man. You don't want to get that one wrong.
No,
it could be quite painful. But so we circled this back. To saying, well, the reason we wanted to get onto risk in the first place, and man, we took a lot of tangents today, is because we wanted to look at risk as a way to assess this adversity that we're looking at. Like, all right, man, I want to do something hard because I know that it's going to spike my cortisol, but that's going to relax me long term. I want to get after something. How do I use risk assessment to kind of gauge these things? Like, sometimes if you're doing something risky for, I guess, in and of itself, or I guess the purpose of what you're doing is in order for it to be risky. How do you make sure you're not going too far? How do you make sure you're not scaling a cliff that there's no way you're going to make it to the top of?
Yeah. And so, and the topic risk, as you said, like we could talk about this thing for like 20 days, like over and over again, because there's so many facets of it. It's like talking about leadership. So in the situation, let's just approach it. Let's bound it by, you want to do something hard, right? I think, and it goes back to like the picking your poison, because if you buy down the risk over here, you're probably assuming some risk over here. If you mitigate the micro risk, maybe you're increasing the macro or the strategic risk. So you have to kind of like look at what your goal is and try to make a good long-term decision on that. And so let's say, what do you want to say for like the example here? Like we're climbing, climbing a 12,000-foot mountain. Like, what do you want to use?
I don't know. Let's see. I mean, I for some reason the cliffs of insanity from The Princess Bride are stuck in my head as we talk
Okay.
as we said the word cliff, and so I'm stuck. I'm stuck with this cliff metaphor. We're looking at the cliffs of insanity. So let's say I want to go climb a cliff. I want to go climb a cliff. I feel like it's something I want to accomplish. It's going to be good.
So
It's going to make me feel good.
yeah, so you bring up, I want to touch, like I watched Free Solo, which is like terrifying. Like my palms sweat when I watch that. That's a
Oh,
guy,
yeah, you don't want to sweat while you're doing it.
so he's like free climbing, the North Face, in Yellowstone. And, but then I watched this other one, the Dawn Wall, which was like totally like a better documentary. Like I was like blown away. I'm like, how have I not heard of this documentary, the Dawn Wall? It's like like the story is like, it's just way crazy. Check it out. That's all I could say. But so they're climbing with rope, right? But I think you're looking at this. I want to do this thing. I want to climb the cliffs of insanity. What do I need to do this, right? So I should probably practice the thing. I should probably like, how am I doing? I should assess my fitness level. I should assess my stamina. Maybe I'm going to just
risks, right?
yeah, maybe I'm going to boulder. I'm going to boulder in first. I'm going to go to a climbing gym first. I'm going to see how I do on a climbing wall where I have a belay, and I have a helmet on. And I'm going to see, like, do I have like the upper body strength? Do I have the finger strength to do this thing? So you're looking at all these different facets. And then you're assessing, do I have the mental, psychological fortitude to do this thing? If I was doing that, I would be, hanging out with climbers, talking to climbers. I had a friend of mine. So Naval Social Warfare has a lead climber course that we send guys to be able to, because you still want to do the like Point du Hoc mission set, right? Like we want to be able to have guys that can like
lead climb.
They can lead climb, they can set the protection so the rest of the force can scale that wall, right? And he's like up on this like, I don't know what it was, like what the rating was, but it was sketchy for like, this dude was like, 5 hours into his like climbing journey career, like not a lot of it. And he was talking to people on the wall and they're like, yeah, I've been climbing for 10 years and I'm just doing this for the first time. And he's just like, what? But he's like up on this one spot and he runs out of like, there's nowhere to go. And the instructor down on the ground is like, shimmy. And he's like, what the hell? What is shimmy? He's like, what does that mean?
What that word means.
And I guess it means like you kind of just like you're sucked up to the wall, like you're just like cupping your body and then you just shimmy to the side. But he's like, I don't know what that is. So you just had to figure it out in the middle of like the climbing evolution. But and that brings me to I'm gonna read stories by climbers. I'm gonna watch interviews of climbers. I'm just gonna see all that stuff. So I'm going to just pause my long monologue.
No, it was like, so I feel you skipped a step. I feel you went straight to mitigation measures, right? You're like, all right, here's the thing. I don't think we talked through necessarily the things we wanted to mitigate, but all of the things you described are, of course, what you would do to mitigate those. You're like, you're going to go practice. You're going to warm up. I'm going to make sure I'm capable of doing this. I'm going to talk to experts. But what you're really getting at is saying, well, okay, I'm looking at this cliff in front of me, assuming I know nothing about it. Like, what bad could happen? What are the things that could happen to me? Like, well, I could run out of arm strength halfway up the cliff, right? That's pretty solid. I mean, based on my condition, I could say that it's pretty likely and it's pretty dangerous. I could slip. The weather could blow in. Right. I mean, we were looking at all the bad things that could happen during this climb. And you're like, well, how do I mitigate that? Like, well, I could develop my arm strength, right? I could develop my arm strength so that I've got the stamina to do this. I could test it to make sure that I got the ability to do this at all. Okay, I've done it on a smaller cliff. I feel like I can make this cliff. I could run a couple of practices. I could check the weather. I could check the weather and say like, hey man, is it going to rain today? Do I have the ability to mitigate that? But I think what you're saying is all correct. It's just the process by which you get there is really, I think, applicable to anything in life, right? Like pick a cliff, pick a figurative cliff or a little cliff. It's all going to be the same process.
Yes. And then there's also different facets of risk, right? So there's like the physical risk, there is, financial risk, there's like, are you going to die and then leave your family and they have like no means of support? There's reputational risk. Like, are you, if you back down from this, are you going to, your WASTA, your reputation is going to suffer, your street cred.
The number one risk in the special operations community. The number one risk in the special operations community is cool points. Can't lose the cool points, man. Can't do it.
Yes. As somebody wise once said, don't scream like a bitch because you might not die.
That's so true though, right? And, life can be long, right? It's like Chris Rock said, life's not short. Life's long, especially if you make the wrong decisions, right? And if you humiliate yourself in a recordable medium, it's not going to go anywhere. I think that applies to actually everybody. That's not just the special operations community, right? Like don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. And then the one thing I want to hit on is, like, Csikszentmihalyi, right? The psychologist that talks about flow. So he's, he found that, that flow state is coming, when, it's not too difficult for the person and it's not too easy. So you got to find the right, endeavor. You got to find the right adversity that, is going to stress you, but it's not going to send you into the red, but it's not going to be too easy for you.
And that's where I think mystery mitigation really gets you. And that can be in the financial world, that can be in the exercise world, that can be in physical challenges, it can be in combat, right? Finding that sweet spot comes through the exercise of functionally judgment. What we're talking about is judgment, right? The ability to say, all right, what bad could happen? Okay, I can get close to that line. I don't want to cross that line into things when it's all of a sudden going to be unlikely and really bad stuff's going to happen. But you also don't want it to be too easy, because if it's too easy, you're not going to really perform. You're probably not doing something challenging enough to get the effect you want. Like if you are straight up chasing a good feeling, that comes from a sense of accomplishment, you're not going to get it by just laying up on something too easy. But you're also not going to get it if you crush yourself and embarrass yourself doing something too difficult. So kind of learning to assess the likelihood of bad things happening, how severe those things are, and then learn how to mitigate that is a good way, I think, to find out internally where is our line? Where can we get to before we start falling apart? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't read that line very well. In our community, for sure. Our community, I think, very painful way to learn where that line is.
Yes. Yeah. And that's written in blood. I think that's why, procedures change, usually because somebody has died or been severely injured. We are like, whoa, that was a bad move. We're going to do that differently next time.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's what it takes, but it's also the way we live our lives, right? The trouble with life, though, is that a lot of things aren't recoverable, right? I mean, a lot of the things that we're talking about, the community can recover from in the case of these specific physical instances, like, whoa, actually, you should not jump with that little of a safety margin. Actually, you need much more of your safety margin, but that's carved, like you said, it's written in blood. But the guy that did it doesn't learn from it, right? Only the rest of the people around that watched it. And so it can be unfortunate that I think in our own journeys to like learn how to mitigate risk, you only get to do some things once, right? Retirement from the military was one of those fun ones that I just encountered. Like, well, how do you ever learn how to do it better? Like, how do you know if you did something wrong? Well, you won't. You did it once. That's your only time you'll ever do it.
You're one and done.
And if you screwed it up, well, hey man, sorry. You can mitigate that by looking at other people, by talking to people, like to your earlier points, by consulting experts. But man, sometimes you just gotta hope it works out.
Yeah. And I think, you got to understand the stakes of what you're doing. So if the stakes are, legitimately terminal, you're going to die, then you have to approach that risk decision differently than, you're playing poker and it's like $20. It's a different decision.
It's the severity, right? The severity and the likelihood, right? If it's severe and it's likely, probably got to take that guy pretty seriously. The trickier ones, though, are when you get into the ones that are severe but unlikely, or likely but not that bad. Then I think it's almost harder to mitigate. Like everybody knows how to mitigate a risk that is both severe and likely. Like presumably, you know that if you do, let's say, driving heavily drunk, like most people know that if you drive heavily drunk, you have both a pretty solid possibility of getting a horrible wreck, and it's there's that it is both probable and severe.
Mhm.
And so most people are like, I'm not going to drive drunk, certainly not that drunk. I'm going to try and keep it to a tolerable level so I don't get there, to that level. But it's the trickier ones. It's when you start like, well, what if I'm driving at point 0.8? What if I'm driving at point 0.1? I mean, it's illegal, sure, but what's the likelihood I'm going to get caught? That's when people start getting in trouble, right? Is when they get into
Well,
the art of risk mitigation.
so, and that brings up, it's not just you. You're embedded in a system of things. So, like, if we look at like AI now, right? So it's like, well, what's the risk of us creating Skynet and we like destroy humanity, right? But now you're embedded in like other, what is called rivalrous dynamics, right? Like you're with other agents that are trying to also do this thing and get there first because they think whoever's going to get there first, right, has this huge first mover advantage. So now you have to weigh your risk, like what you're willing to accept, because if you're too risk averse, right, then you're going to fail. So that is just a thorny problem. And then you think about like the precautionary principle is like, well, if there's, and I would apply that to probably driving under the influence, right? Like, so you're like, well, if there's a chance this can happen, like I probably shouldn't do it, right? Like if I'm having more than like one beer, like I probably shouldn't drive because not only can I hurt somebody or myself, but I can get into like a lot of legal trouble for that.
No, that's true. I mean, it's two different problems I think you pitched out there, right? Because one is almost like the nuclear arms race problems. Like,
Mhm.
well, if we don't build the nuke, then somebody else is going to build a nuke, and the only thing worse than us having a nuke, somebody else having a nuke, and us not having a nuke, and
Yeah.
but that leads everybody to having nukes, right? It's always kind of this foolish sort of decision. It's a different sort of problem. I mean, it's related, right? At the individual level,
Yeah.
we have to make decisions with that kind of material, but it can often lead to just ridiculous conclusions for everyone, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just, man, I don't know how we keep getting there. Now my brain is sidetracked by that. But how do we always come to that conclusion? Like as society, I feel like we almost always race to the bottom on that. Like pretty much,
Yeah.
if there's a terrible way that it can be applied, we're gonna go ahead and just get there, just straight off the bat. Like I
Well,
don't know why.
yeah.
Okay, so
And you look at
I
like
do. We
what
just
we're,
described why.
yeah, what we're discovering with like systems theory and complexity science. Um, everything is interrelated and interconnected, and we, if we make decisions thinking about our individual gain and needs, then we will neglect the larger collective, right? And there's always that tension between the individual and the collective, and everybody kind of comes down on that a little bit differently. But we almost have to like take the mindset of like what I do has an impact on everyone else, so I have to I have to scope my decision making with that in mind.
It's true. It's like risk mitigation taken to the team sport level, where you're like, all right, now not have to look for myself. I have to also kind of look about how my actions will impact those around me. Kind of what things, because in this case, you're not the canopy commander. Like you are, but there's a whole lot of other people, and if you steer, you're going to crash into them, and it's going to be bad. But unfortunately, it does seem like that model. Like you could play as well as you want, but there's always some dick out there that's going to ruin it for you, right? It's always somebody that
Yeah.
won't play, like because that's unfortunately like the old prisoner's dilemma. Like the best play would be for all the prisoners to
Yeah.
keep their mouths quiet and everybody gets away with it. But no, invariably, game theory shows us that there's always going to be somebody, and so if somebody else is going to do it, well, you got to do it too, and we always end up in that same situation.
And that's Tristan Harris calls that, he's the guy that did The Social Dilemma, and he has like a Center for Humane Technology where he's looking at technology, and he calls it the race to the bottom of the brainstem when you're looking at social media and how they're trying to get attention, they're trying to they're really trying to hijack everybody's attention, right? And so if they don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and then they just get into that arms race, or the race to the bottom, I should say.
And government spending, exact same way, right? Well, if you don't spend your money, they're just going to take it away and they give it somebody else who probably spent on something dumber. So let's waste all our money every year. It's a silly.
Well, yeah. So
Is that
you're gonna have to unpack that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you're right. Okay. So this is something I'm intimately familiar with because, of course, worked in government for a long time. So the way the government budget works, and we won't get too technical on this, but basically, Congress votes, passes a budget, or there's a continuing resolution. Everybody gets this much money. Every organization in the government, to include the Department of Defense, so we'll just talk DoD, gets X dollars. Let's say $10,000 for the year. Well, a reasonable person like you or me would be responsible with our $10,000, and we would say, okay, well, I want to save some of this money. One, I don't want to go over budget. So I know that I have $10,000 and I have 12 months. So I need to spend, $800 a month so I don't overspend. And then at the end of that, if I have any money left, well, that would be good, right? That would be responsible. I'll put that away. I'll save it for next year. Government spending doesn't work that way at all. One of the reasons I think the government's hopelessly dysfunctional is because of this. But if I have my $10,000 and 6 months in, I spend all of my money and it's all gone by June. And then I say, hey, I don't have any more money. I can't do my job anymore. What they're going to do is actually take the money from people who saved and give it to me so that I can continue to operate. But it only incentivizes everybody to do the exact same thing because only a sucker would hold on to his money. So what you end up with is everybody overspends all the time to pull the money from everyone else as fast as possible. And any poor sucker who actually finished the year with money in the bank not only would not be allowed to save that money, but he would actually be penalized by not getting that money the following year because he was unable to spend it. So it's this amazing problem that's set up to actually force everyone to be inefficient and irresponsible. And it's a tangent from what we're talking about.
Well, but
it's unfortunately the kind of.
I mean, it relates because we're making risk decisions within a larger context or environment. And there's a woman named Donella Meadows, I think. She wrote a book called Leverage Points. And I think you can actually find like a PDF of the chapter, but it's about like places to intervene in a system to kind of change the system. And so what you're describing is incentives in the system that cause particular behavior. So, changing incentives is one of the things that she says, but like really, the biggest ways you can change a system are looking at like, paradigms, like, and then transcending paradigms. So like the worldview, the way we think about stuff. So, the indigenous, they usually have different worldviews, like, 7 generations thinking, right? So they're like, I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to put that decision in the context of like, how is this going to impact, the environment, my, great grandkids and everything like that. So when you zoom out and take that sort of time frame, it's going to change your risk calculations and it's going to change, the contours of the decision.
It briefs so well, right? But that the only thing better than that is everybody else doing that, but me not doing that, right? Well, if everybody else does that and I don't, well, that's even better, right? That's the best solution of all for me as a person. And unfortunately, that mentality.
Yes, it absolutely
clever enough to figure that out.
And like, there's an economic concept called Gresham's law, which is, bad money crowds out good. And what that means is like you take something like a currency like silver, and if you have, your silver is like 100% pure, it's beautiful, and then I dilute my silver so I get more of it, then I am incentivized to do that, right? And so that's, again, we're back to like the race to the bottom. So like if you can't, and then I even look at this with like kids and smartphones in school, right? So if I don't let my kids have smartphones and like don't let them take it to school, like they're going to pay a price, like a social price for that. But if the school then comes forward and is like, hey, it's our policy, no phones in school, just leave them at home, don't even bring them. If I find them, they're going to be confiscated. Like, then it's like it's mandated, and then so that risk is, or that situation is being decided from above. Now, we don't always get that luxury depending upon the context,
but you kind of do describe something interesting, right? One of the ways you can get around the race to the bottom is to kind of create a system that doesn't encourage the race to the bottom, right? Or a system that either doesn't allow it or doesn't encourage it. That's probably like a really huge topic that we could talk about when we're talking about like how to change systems, how to make things function the way they are. But I mean, unfortunately, at the level of individual risk assessment, I think sometimes we're constrained on what we have the ability to change.
Yeah, I apologize. I've blown us way off course because there's like, we're going to have to constrain this next time.
Dude, I think you know what? Today, we're just going to call today an unconstrained day. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
was a little tired. We're just kind of hopping around a little bit. I think we went pretty much everywhere on this episode. We went all over the place with adversity. We went all over the place with risk mitigation. We talked finances. We talked zombies. Now I got a cat up here.
Nice.
Like, I mean, we covered a lot of ground. I'm not sure that it made a terrible amount of sense, but you know what? That's okay. Sometimes it's just going to go like that, man. That's how conversation is. Like if you want to have a real conversation with somebody, sometimes that's just the flavor it goes. Sometimes you got a topic.
Listen, I think we covered some good ground. You could talk about risk. I mean, we could talk about risk like for 20 more episodes. I think, yeah, we're gonna have to try to tighten up our shot group next time.
I think so too. Well, that's okay. You know what? I enjoyed the conversation. If we talked about everything under the sun, so be it. Next time we'll be more disciplined. You know, we'll adapt and we'll overcome. We'll do some more cliches. And
yes,
we'll
throw in, like, let's throw in more cliches. Absolutely.
we'll tackle this thing a little more precisely. But hey, man, I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening in your undisclosed, mysterious Compass Rosy location. And dude, look forward to our next conversation.
It's an undisclosed location in the Caribbean.
Man, I'm jealous. I'm instantly jealous.
All right.
Yeah. I'll talk to you next week, Adam.
All right, brother.